Hey, Luca here. So every week I receive a lot of questions on the newsletter from engineers and managers about many things. And lately I receive many about careers, how to navigate your career, how to get the most out of it. And I feel that I've always received them throughout the years, right? But in recent years, I've received more and more of them. And I think for a variety of reasons. These have been undeniably tough years for engineers because in just a couple of years we have gone through the end of ZIRP, the layoffs, the economic downturn, even before that, the COVID, lockdown, and now AI, right? And AI so far is kind of a mixed bag. I mean, on one side, there is a lot of promise, a lot of excitement. On the other side, though, there is also a lot of pressure that is put on the shoulders of engineers and managers to be more productive, to use more AI tools. And people generally don't know what their career will look like in just a few years from now, whether AI will replace us all or we'll get to a ceiling and we'll just be more productive. Will companies use less engineers or more engineers? Nobody knows. When I think about careers of people, my own career and that of my friends and people who are the most successful, there are some principles that are always relevant and are always true without considering AI or technology or whatever. So I just want to record this video like a pep talk from your dad about how you should think about your job, about yourself as an engineer or manager and your career. So what skills, how to stay relevant, what kinds of jobs to chase, everything I've learned so far. And I say things that I've learned because personally I had a weird career so far. I saw a lot of different stuff, good and bad. I started as a founder of a venture-backed startup, stayed founder and CTO for about 10 years. Then we sold the company, I got to larger company, and then I started this newsletter, so now I'm more of a creator. There were many things that I liked throughout the journey, others that I did not like. And I have, a few mental models that I like about thinking about work and myself, and I'll try to explain this. So let's go. But first of all, if it's the first time you're on the channel, you're watching a video by myself, my name is Luca. I'm an engineer and CTO, as I just told you, turned content creator, and I write Refactoring, which is a newsletter that goes out weekly to more than 150,000 engineers and managers. You can find it at refactoring.fm. And of course, I run also this YouTube video where I publish some advice every once in a while, and of course the podcast interviews with tech leaders that we do once every 2 weeks. So let's go. The first topic that I want to talk about is about skills, right? Because the first thing that people tell me when we talk about careers is like what skills to chase. And I think this is not entirely wrong, but it's kind of a fallacy that we learn from when we are young, because the whole education system is focused on skills, on making you learn something, you study something, and you get evaluated on the things you know, right? But the difference is that when you have a job, you're rarely promoted because of your skills. You rarely progress because of the things you know. It's more about your impact. I mean, how you create value, how much value you create with your skills, of course, but it's about the value. So skills ultimately don't matter a lot. They're just a means to an end. I mean, when you are past probably your internship or junior levels, for which, yes, of course, your skills matter, even when you are like a mid to senior engineer, you're immediately promoted just because of successful projects that you created or how you improved the developer experience, but not because you know React very well. So if there is only one thing that you have to take away from this video is to focus on creating impact. Because impact creates a virtuous cycle. The more value you create, the more trust people have in you. The more trust, the more influence you get. And the more influence you get, the bigger the projects that you can do by yourself with your team. And bigger projects in turn should lead to bigger value and bigger impact, and the cycle continues and you have a fruitful and successful career. So this is the first part. there is also a second part about how thinking about skills is not the right mental model to me. That is, it's easy to create biases for yourself. So you get very good at something, like a super specialist about something very in depth, and then you more likely become the guy that has an hammer and everything looks like a nail. You think your career completely depends on that. You tend to use always the same things as opposed to the things that are right for what you want to achieve. And this ties in with the whole conversation around generalists and specialists, which is a tale as old as time. But I think it's very fitting, especially today in the age of AI. So we have talked about impact, and you may ask, what skills enable impact, right? Of course, very many. It depends on the situation. But I believe, first of all, a good answer is skills that give you autonomy, that give you the chance to do more by yourself. In fact, I'm a big believer in chasing, especially during the early in your career, but even later on, let's say full stack experiences, where full stack, I don't mean necessarily from the technology point of view, so like backend, front end, or whatever, but in general about doing more things as opposed to doing just one thing. And other than tech, this might be being a little bit responsible of parts of the product, like shipping features on your own, or talking with customers, or creating docs for other teams to use, like customer success, relaying with these teams. So having duties on a variety of things makes you more valuable and I think better positioned to create more value in the business. And I said this is especially true early in your career, and I stand by that for many reasons. First of all, Pareto law always applies. So you can get like 80% good at something with 20% of the effort, and then the latest 20% as like a steeper learning curve, right? So it just makes more sense when you're young to complete this 80% on more things because it's cheaper, right? It's like when you're in games that there are skill trees, right? At the beginning, you complete like the base levels of more skills because it's cheaper rather than going in depth in one direction from the beginning, right? It doesn't make sense, and it's the same for your career. If you think at your skills like the famous T shape with the horizontal and the vertical leg, I think it's more useful to build the horizontal leg first before you go in with the vertical one. And that's not just, for being promoted more or earning more. It's also for yourself, because by looking at different things first, you may also figure out what are the ones that you generally enjoy, that you may want to go more in depth about, as opposed to the ones that are just not for you, right? So this is for the skills, right? But a question might be, okay, but let's say I'm good on that. I'm onboarded with all your ideas, Luca. What kind of jobs should I chase that allow me to have this journey? Because this is the other part of the equation, right? It's not just how you behave. There's also about what kind of roles and jobs you can get. And there are, of course, so many angles for talking about this, and we could stay forever. But one recurring trade-off that I see people wondering about is whether, especially in tech, is whether to join small companies like startup-like versus big tech, like Google or Meta, more prestige, higher pay, maybe slower, who knows. So there is apparently this set of trade-offs and people are not sure. And the first thing I want to say is that for the large part, these trade-offs are exaggerated. That is, companies are not like this monolithic thing that behave the same across the whole company, across all the teams. It depends a lot on the team you work at. It is true on a general level that with startups, you may have more responsibilities, take on more from the get-go, and have more of a generalist experience. And with big tech, there is more layering, more specialization. You could feel like a cog in the machine, or maybe not. But it depends. It depends a lot. There are teams inside big companies that work with the same urgency and speed as startups, with a lot of the good things also that come with big tech, like budget and support. And there are also startups that instead are as bureaucratic and slow as big tech companies. So you cannot judge by the cover, and you can't judge by from the outside. And it's very hard to say, I just want a startup or I just want big tech. I think the wisest thing you can do is keep your options open, applying to multiple roles, and just spend time talking with your potential employer. So ask a lot of questions. How does the team work? What projects are you working on? Are you raising money? Is the company growing? Get the vibes, the feel of what it would be like to work with people on that team, right? Because ultimately, good and bad experiences are made and broken by your manager, by your team, not just by the reputation of the general company. That is always true. And so spend time really previewing in your head how it would be to work at that role in that company. And so speaking of jobs, another question that people have is, when is it time to change jobs, and how long you should stay in a job for getting the best output and outcome for your career, right? I have a little bit of an opinionated take on this. That is, especially early on, you should probably change jobs often, okay? So when is it that you should change jobs? When you don't have much to learn anymore, whatever value you could create, you have pretty much created it. And so it's just the best thing, both for you to move on to better things for yourself, but also for the company, because maybe they can hire someone who can learn more, who's a better fit than you, who maybe you are a little bit discouraged. So it's the best outcome for everybody. And what is a good time? I think in many companies, 2 to 3 years are a good time to learn a lot of what you should learn. I mean, we are not everyone working at Google or Meta or Netflix, where there is like this seemingly infinite ceiling to what you can learn and do, right? A lot of companies, most of the companies, after a couple of years, you have learned pretty much everything you could learn, and there is a ceiling to how much you can grow as an engineer, as a manager. We're always talking about engineers, but even for managers, it's the same. You want to manage larger departments, more people, larger P&Ls, more responsibilities, and maybe it's a small company or a mid-sized company, and there isn't much more that you can do, right? So ask yourself whether you're still learning or it's better for you to move on. And there is, we have talked about ceiling, there is also a floor to me. That is, you should give yourself time to onboard properly and create the best value you can create. That is, I agree with those saying that a long string of like 1 year experiences at companies doesn't create for a good impression for recruiters on your resume, because people will wonder, why didn't this guy stick around enough to do more, right? And that's true. I mean, even if you don't think as recruiters, it's also not efficient for yourself. It takes time to onboard, to get the trust of people, and then to be in the best position to create value and learn and grow. And 1 year is not enough. So implicitly, you're saying, this didn't turn out the way I hoped it to turn out. So to me, you should try at least to stay like 1 year and a half, 18 months, unless of course there are big problems, culture is messed up, you don't like the place. It's not like you have to stay at all costs. You have to leave if you don't like it, but just understand that when you start a new job, you should think about things in years, right? That's the good outcome. If you leave after 1 year, chances are things didn't go out as you would have liked. Yourself first, even before we think about recruiters and stuff. And also, the later you are in your career, the longer it takes. The longer it takes to do anything. You know, if you're a senior leader, the longer it takes to do proper onboarding about all the strategy nuances of the company, the longer it takes to build trust. And after you have spent years building trust with your peers, with senior management, with leadership, the more, if you change jobs, you have to start over, and it takes a lot of time. So we've talked about people you work with, talked about building trust, talked about learning, and this makes me think at a quote that I love, that is, if you are the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. This is very famous, right? And it all focuses on growing, of course. You want to grow, you want to learn from others. But the quote itself is a bit naive to me, because it's not just about being the smartest most of the time. It's about many different things, and you learn different things from different people. So you might ask yourself, what would be the ideal room to be in? Right? Who should be in that room alongside you? And to me, it's three people. Might be fewer than three people, but they embody these three things. But it's, first of all, a great mentor, mentors, plural, that is, people with great skills that you can just learn from because they are so better than you at something. It's something that you care about. The second part is someone who gives you opportunity, that sponsors you, because you might have great skills again, but if you're not given the proper space and room to shine and to take on more things, you're not going to use them, and you're not going to grow as much as you can. And finally, the right culture and peers you get along well. This is so underrated. It's not like every environment is good for everybody. You should necessarily put yourself in a company that feels right for you. And I know this might feel a little bit high level or just fluffy theory, but the more you go on in your career, you might have seen that, the more you learn about yourself and you understand what makes you tick, what are the things you're good at, what are the things, yes, you can improve, but will never be your forte. And plan your career around this. So there's a lot of advice about improving your weaknesses, right? Things you're less good at. And that's definitely true, especially when you're young. But I think the best careers are rather built around playing to your strengths rather than, improving and becoming well-rounded and well-balanced at everything. I don't think anybody can get there, or you can get there at a medium level. Like you can't really build excellence around all dimensions. While instead it might be very valuable to be excellent at something, recognize that, and put yourself in a situation where that is very useful, which might seem counter to what I've said about generalists, but it's not really. I mean, there is a reason why, when you see the T shape, there is a leg that is longer and another that is wider. It's important to build the wide part that inform you what you like the most, etc. But then you will have things that are like your superpower. And the more you know about this, the more you're aware of how you perform on the different things, the more you can make good choices to your career. So I will make an example about myself. So I tend to be a little bit of a people pleaser. So I'm not comfortable with conflict. I'm not comfortable giving too direct feedback to people. Yes, I can do that. It's not like I'm not able to do that, but it takes me a lot of energy, a lot of stress. And so if I'm in an environment that is too direct, too confrontative, then I know that over the long run, I'm not going to do well, because it requires too much energy from me, okay? At the same time, I have other strengths. For example, I'm a good learner. I'm a generalist. I've seen many things, both technology-wise and things that I had to do with management, founder experience. I've learned many things, and I can find my way around so many things. So if you give me one thing to do, I will always find a way to do it. And I can probably take on a lot of things just by myself and be very productive. So over time, you learn to accept your weaknesses and accept that you will never improve past some certain point on that. And you learn also to nurture and love the things that you're best at. So speaking of strengths, weaknesses, and learning journey, all this advice so far, aside from a few examples, have been pretty high level, but there is a specific situation that I want to discuss because it's so common. I mean, people ask me about that all the time. That is how you should think about the transition from IC to manager, from software engineer to engineering manager or the like. When I interview people on the podcast, so many people asked, when I ask them, what is like the biggest tipping point in your career, they say, when I went from being a software engineer to being a manager. So I wanted to cover this. Many people are afraid and they think, I don't know what I'm doing. How should I think about this? First of all, the truth is, to some extent, you can never be sure before you get into it, because it's such a different job that you can't really anticipate 100% what it will be about. Then in your specific team, in your specific organization, it changes a lot with the type of company you're in. But you can do your best to prototype this switch, to try to gather more information and try how it would be. Usually in everything, there is a way to take on some management duties while you're still an engineer to figure out how it will be, right? You can mentor other colleagues, you can do some light project management. Many senior engineers also have one-on-ones with junior folks. So you can do things like the equivalent of 1 day per week that your manager does 5 days per week, and see whether you enjoy this human aspect, this systems thinking, as opposed to just coding. And you can also ask explicitly to your manager about this to give you more opportunity to try things out in case you want to become a manager later. My second advice is, whatever you decide, it's not a one-way street. So on one side, you may design like an off-ramp. Agree with your manager that you're trying to act as a manager for like 6 months, and then if you don't like that, you go back to being an IC. And talked about this with many friends, and I've yet to see a situation where people will not agree with this. Because to a manager especially, it is obvious that the transition carries some risk, and they will always be happy to say, of course, you can go back to tech lead, senior engineer, whatever you are right now. And also along the lines of it's not a one-way street, there's a great article by Charity Majors called The Pendulum Between Engineer and Manager, where she argues that, contrary to popular belief, it's not like when you become an engineering manager, you can't go back to being a software engineer anymore. Not only that should be possible, but in many cases it is beneficial to your career, because keeps everything fresh, both the tech chops and we're working with people, the managerial chops. It makes you a better rounded professional that as a manager can have a stronger impact on the technical side, and as an engineer can have a stronger impact in getting the shit together with others. And so she advocates for doing that every few years. This is not super widespread, but I think especially with AI that reduces, the cognitive load and the difficulty of addressing different things, I think this might become more common. So this is it. If I had to summarize what we discussed today, these are the main points. The first one, focus on impact over skills. If you had to take away just one thing from this whole talk, be it. So your career growth will always be driven more by the value you create rather than the tech that you know. These come and go, while value does not come and go. Use just your skills as a means to an end, not an end in themselves, which is the mistake that many engineers do, unfortunately. Natural segue to this is to embrace your generalist T-shape. Like, start broad, chase deep, full stack experiences early in your career so you see many different things, and only later specialize. Specialization is very important, creates more value, but everything should come at the right time, if you ask me. The approach of going broad first should be more efficient, help you find better direction that is more suitable to you, and also create more flexibility in your career. Third, be open to change. So whether it is startup versus big tech, whether it is changing jobs because you are not learning anymore. Be willing to change roles, be it every few years, especially early on, or maybe a little bit slower. But do it when you feel you're not learning anymore, you're not going in the direction that you would like. And that's it. Thank you for staying throughout the end. And as always, thank you for watching.